All right, so there's a lot more to yak about. I want to talk about something called process versus content, process and content, something I think that came from NLP but was discussed at great length in the Nixium education. So let's say that you're looking at a formula, and the formula is 2 times 1 equals 2, and then you look at 2 times 2 equals 4, 2 times 3 equals 6. Some people might say, well, those are very, very different equations, because the answer is 2, the answer is 4, the answer is 6. So the outcome is completely different. They're different equations. But a mathematician might look at it and go, well, actually, it's the same kind of function. It's just there's a variable that changes every time. But in essence, what you're looking at is the same process. Let's upscale that idea to human behavior. Somebody has a relationship with a doctor, and it turns out badly. And then they have a relationship with an artist, and it turns out kind of the same way. And then they have a relationship with a lawyer, and it turns out the same way. And some people would say, well, they're different. They were different people, different professions. But if you're looking at the process of things, at the sort of equation of things, you go, no, well, actually, it's the same thing. The person who's interacting with those people is doing the same process, and the same outcome is happening. They're choosing the person, they're interacting with the person in some way that's causing the same process. Let's take another example, because look, there is use to this, to thinking this way. I'm going to tell you in a second how to get weaponized, but let's look at it. One more example. When people talk about narcissistic abuse, they might say, well, narcissistic abuse is between two people. And if you look at a family situation, they might say, well, that's different. Or, a corporation or whatever organization, they could say it's different, but it's not. Narcissistic abuse occurs between two people, can occur in a family environment, can occur in a social group, in a work environment, in a corporation, in a church or a spiritual organization, in an entire political party, in an entire country. And people might say, well, that every one of those is different. Well, not really. They're all the same. It's just at different scales. It's narcissistic abuse happening at different scales. So those are sort of 3 examples of process versus content. And we were taught that all the time, inside ESP. Look at the process of things, don't get caught up in the content. Now, how does that get weaponized? It gets weaponized, or got weaponized, because every time somebody would bring an issue that they were seeing happening in the organization, they were immediately discounted, usually because they came with some sort of emotional feeling about it. And we were told, because this happened a lot, we were told, we need to address the process that you're using to bring this issue forward. And I'd say, okay, we can, but there's still an issue. And they go, yeah, but you seem very vested. You're very vested about this issue. In fact, you seem very emotional about this issue. In fact, you seem angry about this issue. I'm like, yeah, I am. But the issue's still there. They go, well, we need to address the process of how you're doing it. The vested process is the problem. And everybody was taught, don't think about the content of the thing that they're saying. Think about the way that they're saying it. That's the issue. Now, that got so horribly weaponized because when people brought issues forward, it's the way that they sort of cut you off at your knees, because people were bringing legitimate issues forward. I mean, there was one person who would later become a defector that in 2016 was trying to point out a lot of issues going on in the organization. And they were told, well, it's your process that's the problem here. Yes, we can talk about those things, but first we need to deal with your process. First we need to deal with your emotional vestedness. And so this particular defector said, all right, so let me get this straight. If I get raped and I come to you and I'm upset, then we're not going to deal with the rape. We're just going to talk about that my upset as though that's the problem, as though that's the initiating issue here. And they were met with, well, no, you're taking it out of context. But they weren't taking it out of context. That was actually a very smart metaphor. That is what they did time and time again to basically stop you questioning. Now, people might say, well, that only happens in cults. No, not really. It happens in the world. Have you ever seen people, on television or somewhere, they're very upset about something. They get so easily discounted. And I'll give you an example. When the court case happened, the Raniere court case, his lawyers were hell-bent on trying to see if they could get reactions out of the people that were testifying, of course, against Raniere. So in their cross-examination, they constantly wanted to see, could they get them angry? I mean, they tried so hard to get me angry. And like, look, I had some modicum of composure, but beneath it, I was raging upset. I was raging angry because of the now, after over a decade of gaslighting, now it was happening again. The abuse was happening again. And they want to break the person and get the person angry because in society, it's not acceptable to be upset. It's not acceptable to be emotional. And what they're hoping is the jury will see, oh, they seem crazy. Yeah, well, that's the nature of narcissistic abuse. The person that's being targeted, the person that's being abused, the narcissist pushes them until they freak out and finally respond very emotionally. And then the narcissist is like, yeah, you see, that's the thing right there. They're crazy. Now, airplane? No, too high. Now, I bet you there are tons of women in the world that can relate to what I'm saying. I think that women are discounted all the time because men say things like, well, they're emotional, as though that's somehow a problem, instead of listening to, well, what are they saying? So I think it's pervasive in the world. It happens all the time. Anytime somebody gets upset about something that they legitimately should be upset about, they are discounted because of their emotionality. And this is something that is very, very strong in cults. So the way they weaponized process versus content is they said, you're getting involved in the content of the issue and you're vested, and that's the problem. And for those of you who have been in these coercive environments, you know that getting constantly beaten upon, your psyche being beaten in that way. I'm going to talk about this in another video about the way they excavate your soul or excavate your psyche. And what they're trying to do is to see if they can get you less and less reactive to certain things. I mean, most people have no idea that's what's going on. The leader knows that's what's going on. The leader wants to try to disassociate people so that they can go do a bunch of heinous shit. And look, the thing that I was told all the time when I was inside Nixium was like, your anger issue, your anger issue, your anger issue, as though that was actually the problem. And look, I am so happy now that I was an angry motherfucker. And I like being angry because you know what? I'm responding to something that should be responded to. There's some outrage that a person should be outraged about. What they try to do is get you not to be outraged. So I think it's super important to understand this about cults and why you sometimes see people that seem to have a very vacuous or vacant response to things. They've been so conditioned to try to control their behavior. That's what they've been taught to do. But as I said, it doesn't only happen inside cults. It's very, very pervasive in society. So there's more about process versus content, but I think I'll do that in another video. I'm kind of trying to see if I can keep these little things in 10 minutes because honestly, if they start to get into hours, it's like, oh my God, please stop. So I'm going to try and do short ones. So that's the weaponization of the concept of process versus content. More to come.